人和主讲人之外全程静音。大家有问题可以先发给主持人或举手示意。主讲人结束展示后会进入提问环节。谢谢大家。
One more time.
大家好，讲座即将开始，麻烦大家将自己的名称改为真实姓名加拼音的形式，以便主持人辨认。讲座过程中，除主持人和主讲人之外，全程静音。大家有问题可以先发给主持人或举手示意。主讲人结束展示后会进入提问环节。谢谢大家。
Just one more time.
大家好，讲座即将开始，麻烦大家将自己的名称改为真实姓名加拼音的形式，以便主持人辨认。讲座过程中，除主持人和主讲人之外，全程静音。大家有问题可以先发给主持人或举手示意。主讲人结束展示后会进入提问环节。谢谢大家。
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining Global Justice Workshop at the Department of Philosophy at Zhuhai Campus, Sun Yat-sen University, China. I'm Junhyuk Kwak, professor of the Department of Philosophy at Zhuhai Campus, Sun Yat-sen University. Before starting our workshop, please note some requests for your cooperation during the talk today. First, to prevent any possible disturbance during the workshop, we are going to mute your audio. We will get your audio back when we open the floor after the talk. Surely you can send us your questions and inquiries during the speaker's talk. Please feel free to text me or our co-host, Du Chan. Should you change your display name with your real name in pinging, it would be greatly appreciated. This helps me call your name correctly during the Q&A session. Third, please note that video and audio recordings are prohibited by the school. We have 3 workshops which are mediated in English at the Department of Philosophy, Zhuhai Campus, Sun Yat-sen University: Political Philosophy Workshop, Comparative Philosophy Workshop, and Global Justice Workshop. This Global Justice Workshop is a very formative forum for sharing and discussing imperative researches in all varieties of humanities and social sciences, by which dialogues across cultural, territorial, and philosophical streams will help our academic community get a better knowledge of global justice and peaceful coexistence. Particularly in this semester, we take family feeling across the East and West as one of the guiding themes of our global workshop series. Recent decades have witnessed renewed controversy in Northeast Asia over filial piety, one of the most durable yet most contested elements of the Confucian tradition. Much of the criticism has focused on the way filial piety has often been read as a demand for blind loyalty, obedience, and acceptance of hierarchy, especially under patriarchal or otherwise dysfunctional conditions. More recent scholarship, however, has complicated this picture by distinguishing authoritarian forms of filial piety from reciprocal ones, grounded in gratitude, affection, and care, and by stressing that filial piety needs not to be reduced to blind submission. On these revised accounts, filial piety may be understood less as passive obedience than as an evolving ethic of intergenerational responsibility, one that includes emotional support, practical care, and even forms of a respectable moral challenge within the parent-child relationship. Even so, these reinterpretations do not fully resolve the problem. They may answer the charge that Confucian ethics is inherently hostile to individuality, but they do not by themselves address family dysfunction, unequal authority, gender care burdens, or the problems of what counts as exemplary parenthood. Nor can filial piety today be discussed apart from contemporary socio-political realities. In societies such as South Korea and Japan, rapid population aging and persistent old age poverty place a heavy pressure on families, while educational competition and long study hours place new strains on parent-child relations and human well-being. Pretty often, we can see that in these societies, family ceases to be a place for moral cultivation and civic formation, and it cannot sustain even a liable home. Recent critics of a Confucian family-centered value therefore argue that it is not enough to reaffirm moral duty within the family. One must also ask how welfare institutions, labor arrangements, communal care, and public policy either support or help family care. In this setting, filial piety needs to be reconsidered not so much as a self-sufficient private virtue, but as part of a larger consideration of mutual care, social responsibility, and institutional support. The relation between family and wider society has also been central to Western political philosophy, though in a different register. Even traditions that rigidly distinguish public from private life have usually treated the family as significant because it shapes the moral dispositions of future citizens. From that point onward, contemporary debates about family or family feeling develop in several directions. Communitarian critics of liberalism emphasize that persons are not formed in abstraction, but within constitutive communities that shape identity, moral judgment, and practical orientation. From this perspective, the family appears as a privileged site of belonging and ethical formation. Feminist theory, by contrast, insists that family cannot be romanticized as a safe place beyond politics, precisely because it is a site of dependence, socialization, and unequal power. It must be examined in terms of gendered labor, coercion, domination, and the state's role in sustaining or reforming unjust arrangements. The result is a more complex picture of family life. The family is neither merely private nor automatically moral, but rather a domain in which affection, vulnerability, hierarchy, and justice are deeply entangled. This workshop begins from this entanglement. Rather than treating the family as a self-evident or politically secondary sphere, it asks how family feeling, such as love, duty, gratitude, ressentiment, dependence, loyalty, and care, travels across the East and West, and how it is shaped by wider moral, social, and institutional arrangements. More specifically, we are going to investigate the diverse thoughts of family or family feeling across cultures by attempting to answer these questions. First, can family feeling serve as a shared moral resource across cultures? Second, can family feeling guide the social political judgment in a reliable way? Third, what principles can help us correct dysfunctional or unjust family relations? In this respect, today's talk speaks directly to the central concern of our workshop series. If our broader theme asks whether family feeling can serve as a shared moral resource across cultures, and what principles can help us correct dysfunctional or unjust family relations, Professor Becker's paper offers a historically rich and theoretically important answer. Her long-standing work on early modern Western political thought has shown that the family was never simply a private or a political sphere. In her 2020 book, Gendering the Renaissance Commonwealth, which was published by Cambridge University Press 2020, she demonstrates that Renaissance political thought cannot be understood through a simple opposition between the public, political, masculine sphere and the private, domestic, feminine sphere. Accordingly, 15th and 16th century thinkers treat the household, marriage, and gendered rule as deeply political matters. Today's paper extends this insight into 17th century natural law, showing that the liberal public-private distinction did not emerge from a tradition that had simply separate politics from family. Rather, family feeling, sociability, or chaosis, a Stoic idea associated with the hero class, meaning that we come to see others as belonging within our circle of concern were central to how civic belonging and political order were imagined. At the same time, Professor Becker's paper is important because it does not romanticize family feeling. Its main contribution is to show that the family has always been political, even in European natural law traditions, which have been frequently treated as origins of liberal individualism. The paper challenges the idea that modern social contract theory begins simply from free, equal, rational, and disembodied individuals. Instead, it shows that early modern natural law was deeply concerned with the household, marriage, maternal bodies, paternal authority, sociability, and affection. This also means that family feeling is politically ambivalent. It can generate care, attachment, belonging, and moral recognition, but it can also naturalize patriarchy, hierarchy, domination, and obedience. In this way, the paper speaks directly to our workshop questions. Family feeling can be a shared moral sources, however, but only if we understand how it is historically formed. It can guide the social political judgment, but only if we listen to those from whom obedience is demanded. More importantly, family feeling can help correct unjust family relations, but only if affection and natural bonds are not allowed to conceal unequal power. All right, let me introduce today's speaker. Anna Becker is a professor of history of ideas at Aarhus University, Denmark. She earned her PhD in history and her master's degree in the history of political thought from the University of Cambridge, and her diploma in political science from Free University of Berlin. Before joining Aarhus University, she held research and teaching positions at the University of Basel and the University of Zurich and the University of Copenhagen. Her research focuses on early modern political thought, gender, maternal love, and then body politics. She is the author of Gendering the Renaissance Commonwealth, which was published by Cambridge University Press 2020, co-editor of Radical Republicanism, which was published in Brill last year. And she is currently completing Politics That Matters, the materiality, it's not easy to pronounce. Okay, materiality of the body politic, I'm sorry, from 1500 to 1800. She serves on the editorial board of Intellectual History Review and on the editorial board of Brill's History of European Political and Constitutional Thought Series. Okay, let's bring our guest today. Anna, can you hear me? Yeah, you should unmute.
Feels like in the first
yeah, we
days
can
of
hear
Zoom
you.
again.
Okay.
Sorry, I just didn't find the unmute.
That's all right. It's okay. Thank you very much. I mentioned earlier you can have time up to 1 hour, and then I will open the floor for Q&A.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this absolutely kind introduction. Also, this, I mean, I feel rarely has somebody. Wait, now I can I see myself or can I see the audience a little bit? Wait, here. Rarely have I feel you have really read my paper very thoroughly and said very kind things about it, actually in a better way than I said it. It's what I meant, but you said it wonderfully. So thank you so much for this invite, which, as you just explained, so this project is very dear to my heart since it touches on things that I work on. And you just mentioned this book that was supposed to be called Politics That Matters. I'm actually the PI in this sort of in a project that we call Body Politics. But from this, I realized I'm not going to write this book, Politics That Matters. I'm going to write, or from this, I'm going to write, or I specify it, and I'm going to write on maternity. So the next book is called Maybe Motherland. It is about the history of political thought and mothers, and therefore I'm most glad to be part of this network. I'm so honored by this invitation. I'm so honored to be part of this workshop, because just quickly before I go on, because I do not see anyone, are you hearing me? Can somebody tell me?
Yes, it's perfect. We can hear you, and we can see you, and you can use the speaker, kind of the layout. You can see your face as well as other people.
Perfect,
Thank
wonderful.
you very much.
So that just to check, not that I'm going on. Right, so I'm going to start with this paper in a second. I also, just for those who just join us, I was not able to share my screen, so this is a PDF, and Jen, the student assistant, is kind of helping me here, so I'm sorry that I cannot do this by myself. I also have to say that the PDF doesn't give the actual PowerPoint justice, because the actual PowerPoint has a nicer font, just so that you know. Just imagine this with a nicer font. Yes, so, but before I talk about maternal feelings, I just want to say 3 things. So first, I want to start with the fact that, so I have been absent from the discussion so far, and I regret this because I have tried to follow the discussion from the briefs. I've read the papers. For those of you who have read the long form, you will have seen that I have tried to engage with some of the papers. I've certainly have learned a lot from this. So it is just, again, thank you so much. It's just really a wonderful, thought-provoking topic. We can talk about this in a discussion, but it might, I do think that the family is back in, which is nice because I've kind of been laboring on this for so long. And yeah, I'm not sure, was I the only one? So I'm clearly not, which is just wonderful. So my second point that you also mentioned, Professor, already, is that I am a historian. So I'm looking at the material from the point of view of the history of political thought. This is my profession. So I do think that the exchange with more systematic thinking and political thought, political theory, political philosophy is important. I, of course, also have my own theoretical point of view that is heavily influenced by feminism. This is nevertheless not really, or not in the first step, what I'm trying to do here. What I'm doing in my work and my research is always to present historical material and really try to figure out how, the intentions of historical actors. This then, in a second step, can make us draw conclusions also for today. Your professor has already given you sort of the conclusion that I draw, namely that we have, when we, with the family in view, we have to rethink certain loved certainties, that there's a big public-private divide in modernity and so on. But my sort of, the way that I approach this is historical. This brings me to my third point, because the title of the entire project, Family Feelings in East and West, is deeply important. I did not bring this out here. I made a slide that now is not on this, but I want to say to this that, of course, understanding the global nature of our thinking is important, and it is the future, and, you know, rightfully so. But it was also the past. For all of the thinkers that I talk about here, and this goes particularly for the natural law tradition, particularly for Pufendorf, the East was extremely important. This is not only then Pufendorf or the Germans, Kant, but also Rousseau. All of them deeply, deeply engaged with thinkers of the East. China is very important to them. Later, India becomes also extremely important for thinking about nature and natural law. But I will give one example later. But this is just important. So this idea that we think about East and West and sort of how they relate, this is not new. This is not only the future, this is also the past. I'm in a very privileged situation now because I was not entirely sure how much time I had. So I just prepared sort of 20 minutes, which now gives me the pleasure of, I can kind of talk a little bit longer. If I'm talking, if you realize that I'm just waffling on, just let me know, no harm done. But but I'm really interested in your questions in the discussion. I now have already a million questions also back to you. As you will see that as I just have realized, we can also sort of think about piety in the family, familial and filial piety as well. But so the shape of the talk that I'm giving you now is really about the choices that I made in the longer version of the text and why I made these choices. So I start with a general observation, namely that if you read handbooks on political thinking, you will get the sense that the family has not been important for political thinkers in the past. And this is, of course, a high simplification. This was mentioned already in the introduction. So I'm writing here, I'm writing against this idea that, modernity starts with an introduction of, or modernity is when public and private was divided. So in the first part now of this talk, I try to summarize some results of my past research because I just, don't assume that you have read my work. So I have to try to summarize some of the results of my past research so that we start from the same foundations. In this first part of the chapter that I submitted, I explain that in the beginning of the modern state, thinkers that we take as being fundamental for the birth of the modern state, including Machiavelli, including Jean Baudin, including Althusius. I'm not sure how well known he is, who are all seen to be at the edge of modernity, the founders of the modern state. They all emphasize the importance of the family for political thinking. So they are not at all saying that the family is a private space that has nothing to do with it. So it's interesting, telling, that scholars have often overlooked this. And one of the reasons, and we can discuss it, is I think that or it has to do with the Enlightenment project, the idea that once we go into the private sphere and we're talking about all these, in a way, if we romanticize the private sphere, we also romanticize politics, and we come into sort of dangerous terrain. So we become anti-modern, we become anti-enlightened, we become anti-rational. And, Professor, you have already in your introduction pointed out that there are these tensions that I'm also not trying to tell you, or that I also understand these tensions. I also understand the merits of making politics that is based on something on maybe on reason. But taking this enlightened reading and actually this post-enlightenment reading and transposing it onto the past is dangerous because it's not quite what these thinkers thought. Because reading early modern thinkers carefully, it is clear, and Chan, if you could jump to the first slide, please. This is on the second page of the longer version, that thinkers in the 16th century never questioned that a family's form and its manners do not exist independently of the state. Early modern thinkers understood that the family and its practices depended on the polity, its constitution, and its mores. So they understood that the family is important for politics, but they also understand that families can be diverse. And they use this to their purpose. And some feared it, and I think Roches is one that feared it, and it made it sort of fearsome to think of a family that is different from the family from the dominant form of the family. And then some played with it, and I think Hobbes, in other things that I've published, also in the book, in the longer version, I put forward my argument that Hobbes played with this because Hobbes really understood that original power is maternal power. so they understood that a family could have maybe one mother or one father. Here you see the birth of the Virgin, very, very famous mural in the Cappella Tornabuoni in Florence. You see sort of this is very about family matters, because this is the birth of the Virgin Mary, or the saints are female saints are in attendance, but these are actually all family members of the actual family of Tornabuoni. So, the past and present here of family feelings is deeply intertwined. But they knew, so early modern thinkers understood that the family and the polity were intertwined, but also that different families had different mores and customs. This was drawn, or these thinkers mainly drew on two traditions. So Chan, if you please take the next slide. Go to the wonderful. So they drew on two traditions, maybe more, but for this paper, we think about the two. And one is Aristotelian practical philosophy. So Nicomachean ethics, politics, and the economics, which, of course, now we do not think is written by Aristotle, but until the 19th century, in the 19th century was already doubted, but in the time that I'm researching, so in the 16th century, it was thought that Aristotle's practical philosophy was based on three books: Politics, Ethics, but also Economics, which had to do with the governing of the household, both the larger household of the state, but mainly about the family. And this is then also a space of philosophy. And the image you see is from a commentary, 14th century commentary on this economics. And the other tradition that's important for this paper and that thinkers drew on is Roman law and Roman political philosophy. So Roman thinkers like Seneca or Cicero, and we're talking about them in a little bit when I talk about oikeiosis, held high the importance of family life in the household. So this is very important, and I write about this in my book as well. For this paper, even more important is, or is equally important, is also that Roman law was incredibly important, and an incredibly important tradition that the 16th century drew upon, excuse me, because Roman law sort of was the foundation of the jus commune, the medieval and early modern legal codes in Europe. And Roman law is organized. It's basically still in use. The German civic code is via Roman law. We've read about Japanese civic codes. There are interesting Chinese sort of ramifications here. But the important thing here is that the Roman law is not organized around a person. It's not organized really as we do now. We organize rights on human beings, persons, citizens, inhabitants, and so on. The Roman law is organized around the family. It is all about the family, and the pater familias, the head of the household, the father, is the most important person in the Roman law. In a way, he is the full citizen, because he is sui juris, of his own right. He has full authority of liberty. And the law is there to kind of figure out the different relationships of dependency to that pater familias, and the way that the property is distributed through the family line. So, taking the Roman law as sort of this foundation of the liberty of the individual is a little bit, as some like to do, is misleading, because this is really about family fathers. And there's interesting things about fiction, that even sons are actually not sui juris, but then the law sort of invents a fiction so that we can take them as being sui juris and as being patris familias. There are very interesting gender dynamics that I have also written about earlier, but also in Roman law, women could be sui juris. So just remember there are these two traditions that we can talk about, and in 2 days we will talk about, it will be so interesting because you will get a different take from my take when it comes to the relationship that Aristotle makes with the family and the state. But maybe one thing that I want to say on this first bit on Aristotelian political thought and sort of the tradition that they drew, that thinkers drew on, from that tradition, they understand that the family, the household, the family or the household, so the oikos, is the origin of the state, and that government in the household mirrors constitutions in the state. So I'm excited about the paper in 2 days. So if I could get a new slide, please. So there, could I? Yeah, thank you. So therefore, so if Roman law is all about the family and so on, the question that was sort of treated as interesting was that we are also talking about here, namely whether a family was natural or not, is not so easily decided for early modern thinkers. Also not for those who think about early modern natural law, as we shall see. I make this point because it shows the alterity of the past. The past is very different. Also kind of to check ourselves today, since today we think of nature as those deep original instincts, and the family is this deep original feeling instinct that all of humankind shares. But early modern thinkers meditating on nature were convinced that the most natural was also the most rational. And we can really see this in, when we look at the family. So, natural law, which also comes from that Roman tradition. So even before the 17th century, natural law always said that matrimonium, marriage, and you see this on the slide, procreatio, which is the, procreation, the making of children, and the children's education is most natural. What they meant is that that is the reasonable way of people to behave, to marry, to have children, to educate the children. This then, however, did not mean that it was clear what marriage, what procreation of children, and what the education of children really entailed. Rather, it was clear that that could be, according to custom and diversity of history, look differently everywhere. And not only different, let's say, in the East from the West, or in, whenever, Germany to Italy. But, here we have two sort of vaguely biblical scenes. We have one of the patriarchs of the Old Testament. So these are two biblical scenes. We have a patriarchs of the Old Testament, and the patriarchs had 2 wives. Then we have an idealized bridal couple, which vaguely also reminds us of the marriage in paradise, so on Adam and Eve in nature. So even the Bible basically gives us 2 different, at least, families. It gives us a lot more families. Thinkers knew this. And if you could go to the next slide, please. The important, interesting thing is that, or important for our talk. Would you go to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. That maternal love is another case in point. It's, oh no, yes, oh, can you go to the next slide? Oh, probably I have, oh no, where's my next slide? Can you go? No, this, sorry. Oh, so can you go? Yes, this is one of, sorry. So I don't, yeah. Anyway, so this is what I wanted to show, that even maternal love, this is great, thank you. That maternal love is another case in point. It's a perfect example. So actually we have in our historical, among historians for 40 years, there's a big debate, whether maternal love is natural. Mainly, we kind of think it's historically constructed. We are still debating whether early modern people loved their children. And maybe that is a silly question, but we can ask what form it took. So we, for example, now think I don't know, I'm interested in China, in, let's say, Denmark, where I am in the moment, breastfeeding is the most natural, most important thing that a woman can do. So Elisabeth Badinter, whose book you see here on the slide, basically said nobody breastfed in early modern Europe, not in early modern France. From this week, this is one of the evidence. This is an evidence that early modern people didn't love their children in the way that we loved them. The connections are maybe, it's a little bit tricky, but the fact is that things that we, I don't know, in Denmark at least, in 2026 think are most natural, breastfeeding one's own child, has not been very natural in the rest of the world, or also in the past. I have these slides, we don't have to look at them, where I show how philosophers think that, breastfeeding is not natural. Immanuel Kant is, who you might all know, the big 18th century German philosopher, was really clear that not only is maternal breastfeeding not natural, it's also not natural to, kiss and cuddle your children. He thought that German peasants were going against nature because they were kissing their children, they were cuddling their children. And it's much better if wet nurses breastfeed other people's children, and very important that when they feed that child, they don't look at the child. And this is most natural because it was most reasonable. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, early modern political philosophers think about breasts, about breastfeeding, about maternal love, but their reasoning, what is natural is, and what's natural in this feeling is very different from what we think. And I'm very happy to ask more questions there. It's one of my favorite topics. So this brings us to a slide that I've just seen, which with all these heads on top, to the slide on no. Here you can see, it's nice that we have this slide, so here you can see that Pufendorf, who we talk about later, says a mother need not necessarily breastfeed. If you can go to another slide. Chan, please. No, another one? Yes. Yes. So there is another, so this, please stay on this. I just say you will maybe see another slide quickly where Barberac, who translated Pufendorf, says, this one. He basically says, oh God, what is Pufendorf saying? Our doctors and other physicians do not allow breastfeeding, as most men know, right? So now I've got my slides in, but if you could now please go to the one with that says with the Roman 2 on, the one we had before with the men, the liberal. If you could switch the slide, please. Yes, thank you. So so this now brings us to those people who no, this was great. The one was great that we just had. The earlier one. Sorry, but no. The one with where it says liberalism on top. No? Another one? There are these three heads. Yes, yes, great. So this brings me to, no, the other one. Okay, it
Chan,
doesn't
could you
matter.
stay
It
at
doesn't
the
matter.
kind where it's that liberalism on the top? Go back.
If we can,
I think, you know, her. One more.
you know what? I will just go on. I meant the other one, yes, with the three heads
Yeah, I
and
mean, a little
liberalism and
further.
two, but it doesn't matter.
Just one before this slide. I think his connection is not good. Okay, stay here.
Perfect.
Okay, go ahead.
Perfect. So, so now this, you know, thing about nature, emotions, family, now this brings us to the beginning of liberal theory. These are, you know, I just want to show them to you. These are the three people that are kind of in the background of the next 10, 15, 20 minutes of this talk or so. This is the beginning of liberal theory. In this part of the paper, I look at modern natural law theories, called also theories of reason, Vernunftlehre, written in Germany, or well, in the Dutch country, in Paris, so written in Europe among sort of the 30 Years' War and different wars of religion, civil war in England. So as I said earlier, also here, handbook theory, handbooks operate with, I would say, a myth, which says that with those contract thinkers, the road to modernity is paved. That means the public-private divide is established, the family is transposed by individuals. And again, the reason, and you know, so I have a lot to say about the individual, and so much to say that I couldn't put it in the paper. It just didn't work, but hopefully at one point I can. But so we have this sort of the idea of modernity, the idea of the modern individual, totally without ties. Hobbes kind of in jest said like mushrooms, springing like mushrooms. Now, the reason why this is often maintained, even though when we read these people, it really kind of doesn't hold, is, I think, the desire, particularly in Anglo-American scholarship, to make those people forefathers of revolutions, of republics, because everybody else is seen to write in their wake or in this tradition. But far from understanding human being or the human being as a singular, lonely individual, modern natural law theory clearly placed the human being in the family. These people more or less maintained that the form of the family influenced how the state was made. They all thought that through life in the family, moral understanding was trained. So we do not we do not at all lose this connection of ethics and family. The family is the place that this is trained. This is particularly important for Pufendorf, the last one here on the slide, who was really, I mean, very important for German state making. He was a politician, or he was in the service of the king of Prussia, the king of Sweden before that. Lots of his political thinking, lots of his theories were part of sort of official state policy in the making of the modern German state. So it's really, really important. all of them, Grotius, Hobbes, Pufendorf, find in the family the origins of authority. So the origins of power lie in the family, but for all of them in different kind of ways. So for Hobbes, the origins of power lie in the mother. For Grotius, obedience is and authority originates, we will see this in a moment, from the parental, from the power that parents have over children, but the father's power. And for Pufendorf, definitely the parental power and the piety, familial piety was the origin of political power, but this was done via contract. So, but these are all the origins, that they all have these important connections in their political thinking from the family to the state is really or makes sense. It makes sense for early modern Europe. Early modern historians, not political theorists, but historians who look at documents and sources and so on, have long argued that it was through the regulation of the private sphere that the early modern state was able to develop and consolidate. So the Reformation was a huge, very important for German state making, or for Northern European state making, for all European state making. The Reformation, even the non-reformed countries had a counter-reformation, and and reacted to the Reformation. But the Reformation, that big upheaval in the way that belief and theology is organized, was in effect, on the level of the state, a legal enterprise that turned all legal regulations that formerly belonged to the church now into the state. And that is mainly marriage law and family law. And it is thus through family law that the early modern state is consolidated. If we take the Reformation then as one of the most important building blocks of the modern state, we have to acknowledge that this was made through family law and through family politics. This brings me to the next slide. Tan, if you could switch slides. In the other direction, so the one is now sociability is key, I think it says. Another one? So yes, so one more. This is really all my fault because I couldn't share my slides. So one more. Yes, stay there. Great. Okay, so the important thing that I don't know why is not really discussed, or discussed wrongly in some sense, is that both Grotius and Pufendorf, human beings are sociable by nature, and socialitas, appetitus societatis, so sociability is key. In a famous passage in his De Jure Belli et Pacis, Grotius wrote, and this is the quote here, "Now, amongst the things peculiar to man," so to human being, "is his desire of societies, appetitus societatis. That is, a certain inclination to live with those of his own kind, not in any manner whatever, but peaceably, and in a community regulated according to the best of his understanding, which disposition the Stoics termed oikeiosis. Therefore the saying that every creature is led by nature to seek its own private advantage expressed thus universally, must not be granted. So, human beings love society for its own sake, even though that Grotius does not deny that we also act from self-love. But he clearly says, the saying that every creature is led by nature to seek its own private advantage, expressed universally, must not be granted, right? This is actually then what later thinkers argue with a sort of, you know, we can talk about evolutionary psychology later, but it's still, so they're saying it is not about yourself, your own advantage. And it is just absolutely curious that very often oikeiosis or appetitus societatis is indeed translated or understood as exactly that, as self-love. Yeah, I have a longer paragraph in my paper about this, but it's it's really curious, to say the least. And again, it has to do with sort of an idea that we're here at the beginning of modernity of the rational individual, and sort of the idea that these people, the founders of this tradition, are saying that it's actually the family that is the base and the other love is the base, is kind of not what particularly English and American scholars would like to say in here. So Grotius, nevertheless, Grotius showed that appetitus societatis was the Latin translation of oikeiosis, deriving from oikos, the term the household in Greek, which does not, of course, refer to mother, father, child, any kind of modern nuclear family, but refer to a broad group of people. So the household, the oikos, denotes the space of family relationship, which are also linked to political constitutions and to the relationships of citizens and to justice. Oikeiosis explained how human beings came to be ethical and communal political beings. Parental love was styled sort of at the origins of this communal feeling that united humankind in universal kinship and which lay in the recognition of a shared humanity. So quoting from Cicero and Seneca, and this is why I said that these traditions remain important. So quoting from the Stoics, or, you know, Roman Stoics, early modern natural law thinkers were clear that it was not only fear, but love that held human beings together. Also in the age of contract, and despite wars that took 30 years and actually spanned the globe, human beings were seen as not capable of instilling fear, but also radiating love. Now, this parental leave sort of systematically and in theory this parental love, and that this is the origins of ethics, comes from that Stoic observation that we are thrown into the world weak and helpless. Sort of also Grotius starts with this, we find this in Cicero, Seneca, that human being is the only animal in the world that is thrown into it absolutely weak, helpless, imbecilitas is Latin term, and only because the care of the others through the care of the others, we make sense of ourselves and of the world. And of course, this is a cosmopolitan idea, but what I found curious here, what I'm actually going to write more in my book about, but this is archival research that I just couldn't do, is that for a long time, whenever I read it, I was taken aback by the diminished role of the mother here. Because children are, of course, not thrown into the world. They are born by mothers, they are born by women, from women's bodies. They are helped by mothers then. They were breastfed by mothers, or at least by women. They are also brought in by wet nurses, by midwives. And I argue that Hobbes is the only one who absolutely understood this and who wrote then about the powers of mothers. If you can go to the next slide, please. Hobbes.
Connection is not good, so that it will take some time. So
Yeah, so I'll
all
just
right. But
continue.
anyhow, he's going to turn the page now.
Yeah, wonderful. So Hobbes is the only one who kind of takes this seriously and says the only natural person, or the paternal power, parental power, is actually maternal power in the state of nature. The only person with sovereignty, imperium potestatis, is the mother. In the state of nature, every woman that bears children becomes both a mother and a lord. And later on, he says that this is imperium. This is premier authority. This is sovereignty. So the problem was that, and I've published on this, but the point is that these thinkers knew about maternal power. It's most telling that they all, so Grotius, Hobbes, and Pufendorf, solved a dilemma about powerful mothers differently, and they solved it in some sense against mothers. So Hobbes says states are founded by fathers, and we can talk about this. And for Grotius and for, but Grotius and Pufendorf solve it in a different way that we talk about now. But the problem was that they all thought that men and women in the state of nature were equals. So these thinkers want to say that all human beings are equal, and that that is the same for husband and for men and women. They are all equal, and they wanted to show, though, also that it was rational that fathers, patres familias, fathers dominated the political sphere. And here now we come to the filial obligations and piety. It is particularly the parent-child relationship that was then under intense scrutiny by natural law thinkers, and I've laid that down elsewhere. But one of the reasons was that this relationship signified, and particularly in the Protestant mind, the origins of obedience and of obligations, then also in the political sphere. So Hobbes had argued that by natural law, where there was no legitimate marriages, fatherhood depended on the mother's right to name the father. So in some sense, fatherhood is a legal fiction because only mothers know their own children. Pufendorf followed Hobbes here, and he laid down that while man and woman are naturally equal, to subordinate oneself in marriage is not natural, but it is part of a voluntary contract. And this is very interesting for Pufendorf. He said it was possible, and it had also been proven that women could also have the upper hand and determine the conditions of marriage, take the children for themselves. But Pufendorf was sure that in general, reason would convince women to enter an unequal marriage where they subordinate themselves voluntarily. So, and this is, I mean, the modern liberal argument, that we see everywhere, for prostitution. Well, this is a free human being prostituting herself, so it's her own choice. So here we have that. So in that sense, these people are forefathers. Grotius had argued that the right over persons was originally derived from generations, so from having children, from consent, sometimes from crime. By generation, parents, both father and mother, acquire a right over their children. But if their commands, and again, this is imperium, this is what early modern people call sovereignty. It's not just any power, this is sovereignty. If their commands, their imperia, should run counter, the father's authority is to be preferred in regard to the dignity of the sex, sexus praestantiam. So this is for Grotius, that the father has the ultimate right to the children, and the children ultimately, obey the father, is sort of, is in some sense natural, rational, and has to do with the dignity of sex that is not further elaborated. Because we have a problem that I alluded to earlier, and I hope that's the next slide, and that's then the last slide. The problem is that mater semper certa est. So Chan, if you can switch to the next slide. So the problem was that mater semper certa est. Via nature, only mothers were certain. Paternity could only be determined via civil law. So Grotius knew that paternity was not secure, and this had dire consequences for society. Mothers loved their children more since they knew that their children are their own. Thank you. So Grotius thought the problem was that fathers can only assume that their children are their own. And in order for fathers to love their children in the safe knowledge of their paternity, a woman's word and her promise in a contract was not enough. What was needed was the natural subjection of the mother sub oculis maris, under his eye. So he works with a absolute, it's not in this quote, but it's still a nice image. So love in the family for thinkers like Grotius was conditional, it was finite, it rested on exclusivity and force and power. So again, here, these borders between nature, culture, politics are hard to draw, even harder to implement. What is clear is that mother's love was distributed by fathers. Then, and I'm coming to the end now, in that way, sons were able to obey their fathers, and with this, they made the original contract possible at all. And I'm stopping here. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you very much for your lecture, and then your talk helped me appreciate your argument much more fully, and I learned a great deal from your presentation today. And I also want to say how impressed I was by your slides. It's particularly the paintings you included were visually, kind of was the fascinating, the remarkable aesthetic depths matched the intellectual core of your lecture beautifully. So thank you again for your memorable talk today. Thank you very much.
Well, if I may just, because first of all, thank you so much. But I think this is very important. So all these images, of course, they are not, this is not an illustration. So I think this is part of the context, and this is part of what we have to appreciate when we try to understand what early modern thinkers thought, or their intention, because we see, the themes are there, they are in art, right? And so, art historians, or for a long time, I didn't use art on slides because art historians are always so annoyed when, art that we can look at academically is used as an illustration, but I try to make it part of my argument.
It's fantastic.
And
actually,
they are also
visually,
beautiful.
and then, yeah, it's beautiful. I enjoy very much.
Thank you very much.
And then I will give you, kind of is that my editorial suggestion sometime later in return format. So I just, for now, let me, raise some positioning questions to facilitate questions from the audience, as I said. The first question of mine is about how we define the natural when family feelings are highly mediated, politics and culture and customs and institutional arrangements. Your chapter's account of maternal feeling is highly illuminating. I just kind of found out that it's fantastic. And I particularly appreciate the point that the family is neither a simply natural unit, nor a merely artificial construction. The strength of your argument lies in showing how what early modern thinkers call, so to speak, nature was historically interpreted, legally organized, culturally coded and politically mobilized. And you make it clear through your paper that maternal love or family affection is not simply invented. Rather, you show how even the most apparent natural family feelings are mediated by law, culture, gender hierarchy, particularly, and political authority. So my question is that follows from this concerns the distinction between the natural and I could say the artificial or conventional in your account. Specifically, I wonder, you can explain this out. Does the natural refer only to biological impulse, or does it also include embodied vulnerability, birth, dependency, care, and affective responsiveness? Let me put, kind of a bit differently. At what point do these embodied dimensions become legal, cultural, and political forms, such as paternal authority, marital hierarchy, and maternal duty? I believe clarifying this distinction would strengthen your critique of naturalized patriarchy. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yes.
And preserving the possibility that maternal love and family feeling remain genuine moral and political resources.
Yes, I mean, thanks for this question. It's of course, I mean, it's sort of how to answer. So I think my point is that we cannot answer, or what I'm interested in is the last point that you asked. So at what point does the nature become the legal, or in what point does the legal become natural? So sort of my interest is in some sense like a step maybe below, a little bit more simple, but always to say that it is far from clear what nature is at all. I come from it from this cultural historical perspective that understands everything as culturally situated. And everything that we try to explain about our bodies, sort of about everything that we see around us, is only sort of understandable through our cultural, through the construction that we, and through the meaning we give to it. So this is historical and so on. But it leads me to but my conclusion from this is not to leave, let's say, the body now, to do what people before me have done and leave the body or the womb or the feeling outside politics, but say, no, this is exactly how we have to can take this back into politics. Because when we understand that politics is not sort of the other sphere from nature, but always, but politics always is dependent on nature, in the sense that our nature is as artificial as our politics, or maybe we can say that our nature is as artificial as our politics is natural.
So that, I could understand that you don't want to make any distinction between them in the first place, because even if there's some kind of, ontological or physiological, is that the nature of, is the human relationship up there, it should be somehow, interpreted through, or possibly, that, the concept of that is also shaped by.
Exactly, everything, so now.
So that ultimately no need, right? So that there is no natural, but there is only the dimension of a naturalized.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and yes, but also, I mean, it's really this. I think breastfeeding is a wonderful example, because it feels so natural. Then, right now, because breastfeeding is seen to be very, very good for the child, maternal breastfeeding. Then, it's not. Then I don't know, Danish women or German women look to I don't know, tribes in Papua New Guinea and say, look, in this nature tribes, you know, they carry their children and they breastfeed 5 years. The thing is, even that kind of nature is of course the outcome of a long civilization, right?
Okay.
And so, but on the other hand, I mean, I'm not, the thing is that I think kind of in our everyday life, what we experience is natural, and we should not also we should not disregard it, but kind of I'm arguing more for understanding what feelings and what ways were seen as natural in the past. Then also understanding that,
I can see
our
that.
own nature is,
So you're not saying that, kind of all these family feelings are not somehow mere effects of social construction. However, you just think of something kind of interplay between cultural schema in that certain things are recognized as natural, and kind of people, their intellections now try to enact this new schema with which we could kind of have a different views kind of through the temporality. So that is historical approach to the kind of, so to speak, family feeling, and that is what you wanted to say, right?
Yes, and this is, I mean,
see.
you could call this a Foucauldian, approach. So there is no, that every kind of relationship is always multi-dimensional. It's always coming from both sides. I mean, it is, of course, interesting, to think, when does the body become law?
I can see that.
When
Particularly,
does
it
the
is
law
pretty
make
much.
the
Particularly, it is
body?
pretty much good. Kind of with that approach. With that,
Yeah.
we can see, kind of how, in what way, kind of, so to speak, liberalism or liberal
Yes.
philosophy is somehow framed.
Yes,
This,
exactly.
kind
And
of
so
what is
that's
nature.
important. Because the liberal philosophy frames this nature as something not political, and then politics sort of artifice. But I mean, and we are just in this as well, because I don't know about China at all, but in Europe or here at university, they are teaching in psychology. They are teaching evolutionary psychology. So basically, explaining everything that's happening with human beings with an idea of, the Stone Age hunters and gatherers. So in the Stone Age, men were hunters, women were gatherers. This is for a long time. I mean, we know that that is not factually true, but it still serves as an explanation why men and women are different, right? And so we are also doing this. We are naturalizing things, based on our understanding of that nature. And then academia is somewhere else. So the question is how we trickle that. But one thing I'm absolutely certain of is that, and you put it so wonderfully, that the body makes the law, and the law then, also shapes the bodies. But how exactly, I mean, is of course maybe a question that I'm not intellectually able to say. But just recognizing this is I think important.
Okay, now I got all, kind of understand correctly. Okay, my second question is about the early modern reception of Aristotle. Before having this question, I'd like to clarify one point about your opening genealogy. You made, kind of this lecture as well as in your paper. Is when reading your open genealogy, I wondered whether the discussion of these thinkers might be organized around a more specific guiding theme. As for example, the different temporal logics through which the family is imagined to prepare for, sustain, or transform civic order. For example, Machiavelli notes that a city's expansion depends in part on social and political conditions under which households can flourish. Kind of Discourses of Livy is a book, kind of chapter 2. But I think that his main concern is not the relation between family and state as such, or city as such. Rather, the family occupies a more ambivalent in his account. It appears as one sign of the vitality produced by liberty, but his larger concern is how liberty strengthens, as you might know, a city and enables it to expand into an empire, right? So therefore, I think that rather than addressing every figure in the opening genealogy you mentioned, the chapter might be strengthened by just the focus on historical trajectory from Balding to Grotius and Pufendorf. This line of development seems especially relevant to the chapters and main critic of liberal public-private distinction. Along the same line, let me turn to my second question. I would like to ask about the role of Aristotle in the chapter's historical genealogy. And your book also, kind of have one chapter on it. So that especially, I just wonder about the kind of my own concern, because I read Aristotle particularly about the political, kind of friendship and political role in terms of the tension between unity and plurality. Because as I understand it, the chapter relies primarily on early modern readings of Aristotle to show how household rule, political rule, justice, and family feeling could be connected. So I understand that your point is not whether these thinkers got Aristotle right, but how they used and reworked Aristotle for their own accounts of family, authority, and political order. So this brings me to this question. Aristotle himself seems to offer not only a model for linking household and city, but also a warning about their difference. The household may be foundational for the city, but the police cannot simply become one unified household without losing the plurality, because he mentioned clearly that what is the city in the politics. He says always about the kind of plurality is a kind of main and major and vital nature of the city. Otherwise, it cannot make a political life possible. So how do you understand this Aristotelian tension between family unity and political plurality? And how does this tension, help us read the early modern discourses, you examine?
Yes, wonderful. And actually, we can discuss whether I can leave this out in the chapter. For me, it's just so important to, particularly in front of sort of political theory students and so on, because that, I mean, we can discuss about that reading now, and we will discuss this actually in 2 days. But for early modern people, Aristotle was saying that, the state is absolutely dependent on the family. But so now I just have to look around just quickly, because I think I have my Aristotle. No, yes, brilliant. Here we go. So in the the politics starts with a critique on Plato, and it's this critique.
It is about kind of sharing family, right?
Yes, and yes. So you're absolutely right. In the beginning, Aristotle makes sure to say that the family is a different entity than the polis. So that's clear, and he says this because this is against his teacher, older colleague, Plato. Because Plato had, in the 5th book of the Republic, said that in the perfect state, nobody knows their parents. So there's the abolishment of the family and of private property. And so the beginning of Aristotle's politics is geared against Plato. The diversity, of course, in Aristotle is to say you cannot have a state without families. A state and a family is not the same. However, that sort of does not undermine the argument that I'm making, or the argument that early modern people were making. They also, none of them thought or wanted to say that the family and the state are the same. They understood that the family is its own entity, but they read Aristotle to say through the family is and they took Cicero to help. The family is the seminarium, the seedbed of the state. So you're absolutely right about the temporal. But from the family, not only does the state grow just in this natural way, in the family also we find all governmental relationships that we later on have in the state. And this is, Aristotle also says in the 1st book of the Politics, why the first rulers, in the world were kings, because that mirrors the relationship they have of fathers to sons. So they took this very, very seriously. And I do think that modern, that we all kind of misread Aristotle a little bit. So I'm a little bit on the side of the early moderns here, because when you read very carefully the beginning of the Politics, he doesn't say the state and the politics are sort of absolutely divided. But he says that, I don't want to know, but basically he says it's one of the many distinctive relations and relations of hierarchy that we need in the world. So
Yeah,
early modern
it's
people,
actually politics, book 3, chapter 9.
Yeah.
He mentions something about what is police. It's not
Yeah.
about the kind of place. It's not about the contract. It's not a kind of what is the military, kind of what is the alliance. Because it is not about the kind of what is unity like a family or ethno, kind of, even he said about ethnos, it's a kind of what is the
Yes.
ethnicity. He only something about the kind of way in which people are working for, kind of their well-being. And then says that plurality is the key. Family cannot be the kind of same as the kind of city is supposed to be, because, kind of family is such a unity. However, without having plurality, city cannot, kind of is that the sustain. He said, kind of the people gather together to, kind of survive. However, kind of somehow, city can sustain when they cannot enjoy this kind of plurality. That's what I'm talking. But I just wonder that
Yes,
is only modern thinkers actually, understood Aristotle is somehow selectively, in a way, what you may say, oikeiosis, that is a Stoic idea. It's more likely, family feeling extends, not in the kind of same dimension and then degree, but the extend to the kind of what is that the community, and then even, kind of city. So that is what you found, kind of from early modern thinkers understood Aristotle. And then I wonder, is that, kind of, is that what you found from early modern thinkers, or you yourself think that Aristotle, a core idea of family feeling, like coming with what you defined as something that is a source for civic belonging?
No, I mean, I have to say, I argue, I sympathize with the early modern reading, because and again, as a historian, so there are two sources also mentioned in my paper. It's William Booth, Household as the Foundation of the Polis, and so there are and then also the work by Stephen Salkever, which clearly shows that for the Greeks, the household again is the most important unity. So yes, of course, these people, these patres, and they are also they are all fathers of the family who then go into the agora and make politics. But
maybe that is your purpose, to show that kind of it is a kind of is that the source for civic belonging. However, it was also a possible vehicle for paternal authority, marital hierarchy, and obedience, right? That's what you actually, reading, kind of.
I read, I mean, not so, Aristotle is complex, but I do think the unity argument is, I mean, a household is not a place of unity. A household is a place of one command, not necessarily. It's not a place of unity, because unity is actually when everybody's equal. A household is not equal.
You're right.
So
But he mentioned, kind of with the book 3, chapter 9.
Yeah.
1,280 around. He mentioned that, right? It's just like, unity is the key with which he differentiated, tell, city from family and, ethnos.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, yes, I have to kind of refresh my memory. I definitely in the book wrote on this and wrote how early modern people sort of reacted to that. But I mean, there's also this, I think more important is, or is not more important, but equally important is as well, that in the Nicomachean Ethics, he says that the justice that we find in the family is not, so household justice is not the same as justice in the state, right? And that is a very important point that I take.
Sure, I agree with you because
but,
he's mentioning something about political rule is totally different from kind of family rule.
But nevertheless, when he comes and introduces what is a monarchy, that's the rule of one, just as the father, and he says we can find in households as it were constitutions, right? So he says when he introduces the concept, he comes from the family, and this has of course a temporal connection. So and then when I say, yeah, well, justice in the household is not the same as justice in the family, absolutely. However, when he wants to say why a democracy is a band of brothers, he says because they are equals and they love each other as equals. And so I think actually that neither sort of the early moderns are right, but I also think again, us, when we say there's a strict division, I think the lines are blurry. And there's another part somewhere where he says, where Aristotle says that in some sense, like who is part of the constitution? It's the one who, who's a citizen, is the one who rules and being ruled in turn. That actually is just what the wife is in the family. But he also says, but that might change. There might be constitutions where even farmers, the people who work the land, might be citizen. So even Aristotle understands that, again, sort of these whole things can change. Right.
I see.
But one thing is clear for Aristotle, and there I'm with you, and the early modern people were also with you: no community of wives, no abolishing of private property. If nobody knows what is mine and what is yours, if nobody knows their own father, and there we have the family again, the whole state will crumble. So he also, so in that sense, you need the family, as an intact unity, where the state, that is not the state. However, the state is very based on this hierarchical model of the family. Maybe I would say it like this.
I can see you're reading though. And actually, I also, I'm very, kind of feel sympathy with the early modern thinkers, particularly about political rule. And then, kind of is that, in that all people are supposed to be, placed, kind of in equal footing. And then I think that is the one that actually, kind of hit them, kind of to read Aristotle that way. Okay. All right. My kind of final question, which is about, kind of appetitus societatis. It's about, appetites for society and its relation with the maternal feeling. And I think that this one, kind of is particularly your discussion is very important. And then, kind of it's pretty, kind of stimulating because it shows that human social, and can I say in sociality, okay? Human sociality is not grounded merely in fear, self-preservation, or advantage. Rather, sociality or sociality and justice seem to emerge through experiences of birth, care, dependency, affection, and belonging. I think in this context, I think that one of the chapter's most striking in suggestions is that maternal bodies and maternal care help make possible the child's first experience of being at home in the world. I really like this. My question is about this, the role of maternal care in your chapter. Are you saying that social life itself begins from maternal care, or are you using maternal care as one powerful example of a broader human experience of care and dependence? For me, this distinction appears to be, kind of important because if maternal care becomes too central, it may sound as if motherhood is naturally assigned to woman. But how can the chapter avoid this risk while still keeping the important, kind of point of maternal care in your argument?
Yes, thank you very much. I mean, this is part of the book that I'm researching. And as I said earlier, I really need to kind of So I have to think more, but I also have to see more material. So the thing, but why I still, even though it's not really fleshed out, why I wanted to bring it in, because it's puzzling. So we have appetitus societatis, and it's quite clear that this, I mean, this is because, and they always say this, that, you know, human being is thrown into the world and it's so weak, and all the other animals, you know, can walk, and human beings not. But here, so of course, but here the mother is absent. So I put the mother in, but more to show that there is an empty position, because the way that it is framed is not because they are born from mothers and then mothers help. I put this in. They say we are thrown into the world, we are helpless, and through the care of the other, we, you know, recognize the other in us, and, you know, and it's love and so on. And then actually there are nice sort of commentaries, earlier commentaries, that maybe then talk a little bit about the love of mothers, but the mother is absent here. So this is part of, like, I have this little critique, and I absolutely need to do more research in how they phrase it, because it cannot be that I'm the only person who has realized that, you know, that sort of the mothers are not there. So because and so, but I think Hobbes at least gives us a cue, because Hobbes is the person who says, well, if, you know, there isn't, so yes, we call it paternal power, but it is actually the power of the mother. Again, not because of love, but because she gives birth to the child, and then she keeps it alive, or decides to, you know, abandon it. And that is also her right. So Hobbes comes into this. So he is the one who puts mothers in, but not, you know, in a sort of not about care, not about love. This is about, you know, yeah, you nurture them and then you throw them away. Pufendorf also talks a lot about powerful mothers, Amazons. I will have a whole chapter on Amazons in my book. But the Amazons, again, these are strong, you know, fighters, partly Asian, partly they're thinking of yeah, that's also very interesting. But again, these are not maternal figures; they are warriors. Who, you know, take the female children for themselves, Pufendorf writes, and then give, you know, the sons to the fathers, or, you know, and they don't care about the sons, and they, you know, and Hobbes is also that he thinks that, you know, while he thinks that historically fathers made cities, mothers can do so as well, and he takes the Amazons in as a case in point. So your question, so I know I have not answered your question. That is because I need to think about it. I know, you know, motherhood is important, and I know they see it, and this is why they are kind of really kind of try to say, yes, there is maternal power. No, but actually it's the power of the father, because they know that sort of the mother is this, you know, empty, or there is, and sorry, but just I need to say two more things. And one is that very importantly in Roman law, the fundamental distinction about who is free and who is a slave, which Quentin Skinner says is a fundamental distinction in early modern, you know, for the early modern person. I mean, you can argue about it, but that is through the body of the mother, because it is the mother's body who's born from a free mother, the Roman law says is free, who's born from a enslaved mother is also enslaved. So it's the, you know, via natural law, then civil law is a different thing. So that we have physis, the body in Roman law, which usually works with sort of, you know, I said earlier, fatherhood is important, but it is not necessarily, they don't care about biology as much. You know, you can adopt, and that's fine. So this is very interesting. So you have the body in the Roman law here, and it's literally who's born from a certain body via nature is either free or an enslaved. And there was a second point that I forgot, but I'll keep it like this. So it is so the care aspect is important, and I think they know it is important. But how I make their like dance around the mother, which I think is sort of a dance, or is very, that I just have to read more source material. I just need to go into the archive. I just have to see more how
That's right. And I
this
don't
is
want to push you to
constructed.
find out
Yeah.
some, kind of is that political theorists like me to find that is about the kind of is a regulative principle within the family. But I think historical approach also could show that out. How kind of is that the family feeling becomes
Yes.
morally and politically dangerous, and what standards allow us to distinguish care from domination. I think it could be pretty helpful if you
Exactly.
just lay out a little bit.
Yes, yes, and if there is more, so if you can point me to sort of political theory literature to that, I'd highly appreciate it. I mean, I guess we're also talking about it the next days, but so to think through that. But I mean, but in general, I think this is sort of,
I see.
there we can do some really sort of maybe good new work when we think about this. So.
Okay,
So thanks
thank
for
you
the
very
question.
much. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have several questions popping up from the floor, so that I want to start with Yongjia. Can you hear me?
Yes, Professor, I can hear you.
Okay, please do so.
Yes, Professor Becker, thank you for your wonderful lecture. And I have a question also about appetite for society. But my question is about the notion of familiarization, because in some sense, the opposite of familiarization is defamiliarization. So my question is about the phenomenon, some problems you mentioned in the concluding remarks in your paper. You mentioned a lot of social political problems. From my perspective, it's related to self-destruction and self-hatred. So I'm wondering what might be the normative implication from those natural law theory about this. So because sometimes we do hate ourselves, sometimes we become stranger to ourselves. So I'm wondering what might be the lesson. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
This is such a wonderful question. Thank you so much. And again, you see, I'm not a political theorist, so I'm always like working with what's there. I mean, spontaneous. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, in my maybe more sort of associative conclusions that I nevertheless think, I think they're important, but they, have to be worked on. Yes, so I think that's exactly that. So first of all, I would say that in general, in early modern political theory, self-destruction, self-hatred is seen as not something against yourself, but it's against the entire community. So in some sense, this, I mean, exactly what you were driving at. So this is anti-social at best, right? So, you are not destroying yourself only, but you're destroying, because your civic duties, as Cicero, Seneca, as the Stoics said, and as then Grotius and so on repeated, your duties are only duties to the community. There's, I think, only one of everything that Cicero sort of lays down about duties. There's just one, namely prudence, that is just for oneself. The rest is all community-oriented, justice, beneficence, and so on. So if you hate yourself, in some sense, you're doing disservice. You're not doing your duty to the broader humankind or the state. But, and now I think, and this is where I kept, despite my training, kept thinking with modern feminist theory, because it irks me, but because I'm just so personally sort of offended by it, is is that if you frame it right, in a sort of liberal way, self-hatred does not become self-hatred, does not become, something that maybe the people who care for you have to worry about, that you are not social anymore, that you are dissocial, or that you are, destroying yourself for money, let's say. at one point in that liberal story, this becomes free choice. And sort of, if I have one sort of very contemporary point to make, is that I can really, I think with Pufendorf, we really see that argument of free choice, or sort of the I'd say feminist consequences, or the consequences for the weak of the free choice argument, because he says that it is absolutely natural or reasonable that a woman would absolutely submit herself to her husband, even though she is his equal. And this is, he says, is exactly like, because there's love involved, and, and you also love your king. As a citizen, you love your king, so you can also, as a wife, love your husband, even though he has full power, authority over you. And this is where we have this, and after all, she says she has done this contract voluntarily. And sort of this is what I'm kind of what I want to hint at, that this, this is the problem. Sure, we can say, yes, I did it voluntarily. Do we have with liberal theory a way to counteract that, a way to say that you destroy yourself or your body or your, soul, whatever, that you, or your well-being, your mental health? Do we have to have, does liberal theory have anything to say for an ethical argument, or an argument against that? An argument that says you are a human being with dignity, with obligation to yourself, but as a communal being, and therefore it is not okay to destroy yourself because you just say so, right? And yeah, so you pointed sort of the finger exactly onto that I think early modern people would have not, the church does not allow suicide. So you cannot destroy yourself. And it is community, and that's community based. And liberal theory makes it very hard to see and say why you cannot. And it's sort of as an aside, and it always irks me that the most left-wing people, in Denmark always tell me that, sure, pornography, prostitution, all no problem, because it's free choice, right? And at one point, at what point can we say, yes, we believe that everybody's equal, we believe that, you are free to express yourself, but, maybe buying other people's bodies is not a great thing for society. So this was my, So
All right.
yes, this is
Thank you very much.
exactly what we can think about with this, I think. So thanks
right,
for this
thank you.
question. Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Juhao Yuan, can you hear me?
Professor, could you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, Professor Baker, thank you for your wonderful lecture. I learned a lot. And maybe part of my question has been asked by Professor Kwok, so I want to make a following question. My question concerns your discussion of self-love and your suggestion that it differs from our modern understanding. This reminds me of Aristotle's distinction in Nicomachean Ethics. He grounds family philia in a form of self-love, where family members love one another because they are parts of oneself. And this kind of self-love does not treat others as a strange, hostile, or alien. But Aristotle, I think, also warns against wrongful self-love. That is selfishness, which seeks only one's own advantage and pleasure, and treat others as a competitor. He seems to imply that outside the household, this selfish version as wrongful self-love is more common, since we cannot regard everyone as a part of ourselves, even though we may form some friendship with some, but mostly they are not the true friendship. So this, I think, is also one of the rules of fictional conflict that Aristotle criticizes. If this is true, my question is this: is family feeling not likely to hold only within family? And once we go beyond these boundaries, does it not become extremely fragile and continent? In other words, does your proposal to use family feelings as a cross-cultural moral resources not ultimately depend on moral philosophical foundations that maybe not as stable as you assume? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful question. And I mean, I completely agree. So I think when my intervention to the colleague who asked the question before was not to say, okay, we now just should think about the family. On the contrary, as I also said, I mean, the problem is, you know, that families are, of course, or their unity is only unity from the point of view of the pater familias, who has slaves and and the wife and a wife. Although these are different things, but we have to see what feelings we are addressing in a family, right? I mean, why we don't like the family, in modern life as a blueprint for the state is, of course, because families are traditionally a point of patriarchal, almost not tyrannical power. I mean, for Aristotle, it's precisely not tyrannical, because the pater familiae, the head of the family, is a despot only for, the despot is the translation of the holder of enslaved people, but he's not a despot to his wife. I mean, he has to rule constitutionally over his wife, right? But, says Aristotle, so in a kind of political manner. But nevertheless, this is not, we would like to have, I hope, conditions of equality. If we interact with each other, and the family is not a space of equality, at least not in Aristotle. So, I'm not saying, okay, let's all behave like families, because, but what I'm saying is that we pretend we are not thinking about families, and we're pretending, whatever contract theories, the liberal theories have abolished the patriarchy, but they have just put it in some sense into the public realm. So this is actually an argument that, it's not, that you can read in Lynn Hunt, the family romance of the French, the family romance of the French Revolution, a very, very good argument that I love to quote when I want to think about fraternity, because the idea is, okay, we're all brothers now in the political sphere, but where are the sisters, where are the mothers, right? So she kind of writes, they have the revolutionaries in the French Revolution have guillotined, have toppled the fathers, and now are all brothers, but they put, the sisters and their wives still back in the family, in a non-equal relationship. And so in some sense, I could also say, yes, we're pretending to be equals, but but this is only some people, not all. I don't think the family helps here at all. I don't think the family is the solution. But what I think more, it's if we follow these thinkers and what they say about how families originate and what that has to do with political thinking, then we see that their whole idea that we're all equal and this is just about equality and rationality does not hold, because in the background is still, sort of their own space of the family where they can rule as, patriarchs in the household. And this is actually exactly what the French revolutionary woman Olympe de Gouges wrote. She said something like, men, you need, you pretend to have, you have cut your chains, but only by, putting us, your sisters, into chains. So she, in the 18th century, women understood that nothing had changed, not much had changed for them.
All right.
And sort of that is more where sort of what I'm driving. not to say we should all, I mean, not that I do think there's an argument that we should care for each other, and I do think thinking about babies and mothers is very, very important. Maybe also for politics, and I wish politicians would think more about mothers and babies and care. But yeah, I didn't want to make that point that I'm not a Platonist. I didn't make the point that we should live all. We share
Okay.
wives. But
Okay,
but yeah,
you.
a fantastic question, and thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Duchan?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Beck. Thank you for your wonderful lecture. My question concerns your treatment of John Locke. At the beginning of your paper, you cite Locke as a representative of the liberal tradition. When you move to your substantive discussion, you focus on Hobbes, Grotius, and Pufendorf. Given John Locke is also a natural law theorist, may I ask why you leave him out? Unlike Grotius, Hobbes, and Pufendorf, Locke emphasized the incongruence between family and state while maintaining the importance of family. So given this, I can see that Locke might not fit your argument as literally as Hobbes and Pufendorf, but I still wonder whether Locke's treatment of the family is an exception within early modern natural law theories, or whether there exists another strand in early modern natural law tradition. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this question. The simple answer is no, he fits absolutely. He's one of the main culprits. So I basically didn't put him in because I ran out of steam, out of words, and I need to do also more research. But so far things are very clear to me. Yes. So of course he says the family and politics are different things because he writes against Filmer, who says all monarchical power is paternal power, and then he writes the first treatise all against this. Yes. But when we look into this idea what a state of nature is and why we need the state, he is, what I really would have loved to write, it will come into the book, is that we get from Locke this idea that things are separated, and this idea that this is now about the individual. And whenever you read a handbook and you read on Locke and making a state, you will always read, yes, and he thinks that all the individuals in the state in that situation, in that state of nature, wherever they feel now we need a state, we need a judge, this is the individuals are doing this. If you read Locke, he is not saying he's not using persons, he's not using individual, he is using gentlemen, he is using fathers. He's actually saying the state is, we don't need a state. Like if everything's fine and we're just having like nice relations, we don't need the state. We need the state for property, in order to protect property, so that we are not like constantly fighting about who's who. He presupposes already a hierarchy once, when the state is founded. At that point, he seems to think there are, lots of people who are haves, who have a lot, and lots of people who don't have a lot, and that is their own fault. So immediately the equality that he also believes is natural is kind of, he doesn't care about it because it is all about, have you done enough labor and sort of, made more and amassed more property. And then it is quite clear that he thinks that these are, and he says this also at a passage, these are, again, heads of households. These are the fathers that make the state. So this whole idea that we get from Locke to, our equality in the civil sphere is already a misreading, because this is only men. The second question with Locke is, this is about how accumulation of labor in and above your body makes property. Now, in an early modern society, and we can think of early modern settler society in the United States, who made a lot of things? Women. So women would take, his love, Locke has this fruit example, but who made the fruit and who preserved the fruit? These were, the wives, the settler wives, they were doing that. He doesn't think that that's her property or their property. This is clearly the property of the head of the household. So I would absolutely suggest that Locke, and I mean, again, I'm not the only one. Carol Pateman is amazing on Locke. So do read Carol Pateman's The Sexual Contract, written in the late 80s. It's still, I mean, I absolutely like it. And she also, points out all these inconsistencies. So Locke is very much part of the story, but yeah. I think for this paper, I will reframe it and just do Pufendorf and Grotius. And then in my book, I will really, really talk about Locke too. But he is so part of the story. And I think he is so much the reason as well, probably, why lots of Anglo-American historians kind of read Pufendorf and Grotius a little bit wrong. Because they are in a different tradition. Grotius and Pufendorf are in the German/Dutch Reformed Protestant tradition, and they are not in a different sort of English tradition that is also Reformed but differently. So when we really need to have a better, or I have to have a better understanding of the immediate context. But thank you for noticing, Locke. He is an absolute part of the story, but I think he is the one who really takes the individual up, from whom we think individuals are these equal people who make the state. But actually, he is very clear that these are gentlemen, fathers of the family with property. So yeah, so thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, Zhu Shenxi, can you hear me?
So could you hear me?
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, hi, Professor Becker. Thank you so much for this inspiring and insightful lecture. My question concerns the relation or the possible tension between okaisis and justice. As you articulate in your paper, okaisis entails, understanding that we are of kinship with all other human beings, and then approaching them with the same sentiment that we feel for our closest family members. And in certain passages, you characterize it more directly as a notion of loving others in oneself, which in my view is similar to Christian love. So I'm wondering, does okaisis therefore imply an undifferentiated love for all individuals, irrespective of their moral character or conduct? If so, it might be contradictory to social justice, even though you present it as the crucial element for developing the idea of justice. For example, if okaisis requires us to love an evil man in precisely the same way as we love a virtuous one, then this uniformity of love does not seem to constitute justice. Or should we conceive these loving evil persons as a way of changing them and thereby realizing justice? That's my question. Thank you so much.
Again, it's such thank you so much. It's such an insightful question. So I think, again, here, I need to think more deeply about it. Oikeiosis is actually not to love everybody. So yes, so it's a non-Christian concept, but of course, by the time it's with Grotius, we have Christianized it. I mean, that's clear. But it's still different. So we have caritas, the love for also the weakest member, which is, what Jesus wants, the believers do. But which, is not framed politically by everyone. But oikeiosis is coming from the place of that sounds not, that sounds a little bit under complex, but for the sake of now, I say it's coming from a place of harmony. It's not coming from this understanding that everybody else is out to get you. So the first thing, the familiarization, is to understand that we are all united in our foundational needs, and in general in that we live together, and from that ethic develops. And from then, what we do with people who are not sociable, because this is again in that thinking, a person who does crime, I mean, he's not yes, he's a bad person, but if you don't have that Christianity, or if you don't have that morality behind you, if you're just coming from sort of that Greek thinking behind you, I mean, the problem is that the person, the murderer or the bad person, is that he's doing anti-communal things, right? And that is how this, how this person fits in there. So I don't think, but I have to read more about it, but I don't think that they are kind of concerned with this in the first place, because oikeiosis just describes this that it's describing that recognition that we are all here and having a shared humanity. And then it's actually quite interesting to talk with Axel Honneth on that, who's also, he's thinking about recognition theory. He had no idea about oikeiosis, which was quite interesting. But it sort of, we have these, so it's more these strands. But so I don't know whether loving the other in that Christian sense is, whether, yeah. So, but I have to think more. And in general, we have to think more about caritas and the different, and affinitas and appetitus societatis. We have to also understand, I have to understand better, like on what level these different emotions, where they are located. So wonderful question. Thank you.
All right, we still have 2 more questions to go. Is that okay for you?
That's fine, of course.
All right, Anna. Okay, so I'm gonna call, Ian. Can you hear me?
Yes,
and then
Professor.
Kocha, Tsinghua University is next. And the final question. Okay, Ian, please go ahead.
Yeah, Professor Baker, thanks for your wonderful lecture. Building on your critical of how early modern theories monopolized maternal feelings, I have a question about a possible contemporary development of this phenomenon. Today's society often celebrates and idealizes maternal love, evaluating mothers to an almost saint-like status. Yet, this moral idealization can also function as a new form of constraint, encouraging or even justifying the expectation that women should sacrifice their rights, careers, and autonomy after a marriage and childbirth. Would you see this as another form of suppression? That's all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. But wonderful. But the last, would I see this as another form of
Suppression.
suppression? Yes, yes. But again, this is a wonderful example to what I was saying earlier. I mean, maybe, so this might be because I feel I'm so ignorant. I know very little about sort of, cultural trends in China, and I also know that China is huge. So, but sort of, I would say that that's what you just described is absolutely not what sort of, German, Danish, blah, blah, mothers, what they are struggling with, because they are not sort of, it's so that it's particularly not wanted that you do everything for your family. It's wanted that you do everything for your family, but you also have to be very, very successful, right? And then you also have to be very, very, whatever, beautiful, right? So, but my point here is, look how even that is so culturally, historically dependent. The mother figure, as as something so venerated, I'm also not sure whether that is now something that is very much in the discourse, again, in the countries where I read the newspaper, so Denmark, Germany, England, maybe Italy. Italy is different. So, right, so, I would say yes. So to your last question, yes, it's suppression, but it might also be suppression to say you have to be the best mother that you can be, and your child has to do you know, has to speak Chinese by 3, otherwise forget the, you know, forget the future. But also, please, you know, be a fantastic professor. Have, you know, 5 books by 30. I'm much older than 30, by the way.
Okay.
So I mean, yes. So it's yes, I do think that, again, taking the family seriously does not mean to say, oh, everything that we think about the family is great or wonderful. I think it is a space of suppression. I also do think that what feminists say, that, you know, the private is the political, that it really goes the other way around. I mean, that I do not think you can have you know, great civil society, a great society, if, you know, the family is not changing. But what we see now in states like Denmark, so Denmark prides itself on an incredible equality. I mean, I'm not Danish, right? I'm German. So Danes think that they have the most equal society possible. What I do see is that mothers, you know, and of course fathers go and pick their children up from daycare, but what I see is that I'm the foreigner, I'm the first female professor in history of ideas in Denmark, right? And I'm, you know, and so yeah, and all the parents of you know, the parents that I know in my daughter's daycare, I do see the women maybe not having the same career than men. So, you know, make of this. So yeah, so families need to we have to have a bigger maybe discussion about what equality in the family looks like, and it cannot be just be as successful as you can be in all spaces. So
right.
yes, yeah.
Okay,
I don't
thank
know
you very
whether that,
much.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. The last question, Kexia, Tsinghua University. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna, for your very interesting talk. So I have 2 questions. I'll make it as
Can
short
we
as
have
possible.
only one now?
Okay. I'll maybe just one.
Okay, thank you
You
very
can
much.
also send me, I mean, I get the notes anyway, but I mean, I'm happy, yeah, if I'm
Yeah.
not
I
answering
can
enough, then
email
do
you
send,
my
yeah.
remaining questions. So I guess my question is quite straightforward, is that how should we make of Hobbes' emphasis of paternal power? So like whether this is like his emphasis of maternal power or maternal authority is something that is reflected in his understanding of political community. I'm not a Hobbes scholar, but I'm just kind of quite curious about this. Like, should we understand this as kind of like a materialistic like argument because women have carry the function of like carrying the baby, so that's why like she has this maternal authority, or is there something more substantial or more philosophical to it? Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, if we had more time, I would want to ask you, but why is that not substantial? Why is it not substantial that if you think about the origins of power, okay, so we are in a state of nature. Nobody is sort of, there's no government. There is, however, sovereignty, imperium potestatis, by one kind of person, not by a woman, not by a man, by a mother. So to me, I don't understand why that should not be substantial. But maybe, but I'm not a philosopher. To me, this is very substantial. Interesting is then what he does with it, because as also others have noted, Carol Pateman, for example, because he's not saying how, you know, how then states are done by fathers, how are states founded by fathers when mothers are more powerful. And it is really, really important because he comes from this first sovereignty in the state somehow to that contract. But that somehow, you know, there we don't know. And so so to me this is fundamental, and I think he's very cheeky, and I think he knows what he's doing, and he does this in order to spite people like Grotius. And he says that it is rubbish to think that the father would have more power over children than the mother. This cannot be. Interesting is that it's not biological only, because the obedience that children have to mothers in the state of nature is not only, or not from the birth, he says, not from giving birth, but from breastfeeding, or from keep being kept alive. But I mean, how do you do that? That's breastfeeding. So this is also why I'm interested in breastfeeding. And so I've written an article on this. I'm happy to send it to you. It's also referenced in the longer paper where I show that what he's doing is not at all innovative. Or this is Roman law. By natural law, the person who has, or the child follows the mother. So this is Roman natural law. This is also Catholic canon law. Natural law, the child follows the mother, right? Because this is a natural fact, mater semper certa est, only the mother is certain. So this all makes it to me not a mere materiality, a mere reality, a mere observation. To me, this is central. And I just have to find ways to convince you all that this is central. So wonderful question. Thank you so much. And if you're not convinced, do send me an email.
Okay,
Thank you.
very
I'm quite
much.
sympathetic with your argument. I'm just like, I want to know more a bit about it. Yeah. Thank
So
you very much.
so do, you know, if you have more questions, of course, do send
Yeah, I
send
will.
them to me.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
All
Thanks
right,
for
thank
the
you very
question.
much. Thank you. Well, it is time to wrap up the workshop. Thank you very much again, Mr. Anna, for your illuminating lecture. And I also deeply appreciate your generous exchange with my colleagues and then students. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It was such a pleasure. And it's lovely to think about this. So
All right,
thanks.
thank you, and then see you a day after tomorrow at Professor Hwang Mungsha's talk on Thursday.
Yes.
Okay.
Should we quickly stay in for 5 minutes? Is that too complicated? No, but I know what I have to do.
So
okay.
maybe,
So then
I will email you back again about, logistics
But I will send
and
you
what we are
something back.
expecting from you. Oh, okay, thank you
Amazing.
very much.
Thank
Okay,
you,
thanks.
everyone, for amazing questions. Thanks.
Okay,
And
all right.
for the invite again.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much for all who joined today. This is the Global Justice Workshop organized by the Department of Philosophy, Zhuhai Campus, Sun Yat-sen University. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.